This is In Character. I'm your host, Gerard Robinson, Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation. Hello, everyone. My name is Gerard Robinson. I am the Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation, located in beautiful Charlottesville, Virginia. What we do at the foundation is we talk a great deal about culture. We talk about the importance of attachment, of involvement, and of commitment. And we know that in education, these things matter. And so over the past year, I've had an opportunity to meet with educators, professors, administrators, and others who are working in and outside the field of education. And today, I'm glad to have a conversation with 8 people from different parts of the country. We're going to talk about rural education. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and much of my education experience took place in an urban setting. And I've had a chance to work and live in different cities across the country. It was coming to Virginia somewhat and also working in Florida, but really in Virginia, where I had an opportunity to really understand rural education in a different context. And even when I lived in Milwaukee, someone said, well, Gerard, are you going outstate? And I said, what's outstate? And they said, anything outside of Milwaukee is outstate. And the whole aspect was, then everything else is rural. When I lived in Jersey City, you think of New Jersey, you think of Newark and Patterson, but you have no idea how agriculturally strong that state is. And so I said to Catherine Bassett, who is our ambassador to pull these things together, I'd love to talk to people who are either in the classroom now, were in the classroom, maybe in a doctoral program, maybe an administrator, to just learn what's taking place in rural education, particularly now in the season now of COVID-19, where we see the inequities really bubbling up to the top, that many of the people who you're gonna hear from tonight saw that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago before the pandemic. But now we're saying, well, since we're going to talk about this, and we've got trillions of dollars coming to the area, will that ultimately make its way to rural education? So we'll find out. And so with the 8 people I have, let me just say hello and welcome. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do a round robin. I'm going to start off with Angel, and then we'll just go across. Tell me your first and last name, state you live in, kind of work you're doing right now, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Gerard, for having me. And it's a pleasure to be in the presence of great educational professionals. So my name is Angel Santiago. I'm the 2021 New Jersey State Teacher of the Year. I'm currently a 5th grade teacher who's focusing on English language arts, but I've also taught 3rd grade. As of right now, I'm on my sabbatical away from the classroom, really working with the Department of Education on issues related to equity, diversity, and social emotional learning. And this rural aspect is something I have a great deal of experience from, because I'm from the southern part of New Jersey, the agricultural part of New Jersey. So I actually live around farms right now. So that's where I'm from.
Thank you. Ricky.
Hi, Gerard. My name is Ricky Washington. I am the husband of the 2014 Texas Teacher of the Year. Currently, I teach 8th grade history, 6th grade history. I've taught 7th grade ELA. This is my 18th year of teaching. Currently, I do teach in a very small school. I mean, I've taught in inner city Memphis, and the district that I left prior to the one that I'm at now was a much larger district. So I can see a lot of differences in the rural schools and then much larger schools, but that's currently where I am now.
Thank you. Let's go to Luanne.
Hi, I'm Luanne Linsko. I'm from South Dakota. I teach in high school math and science to 90 students. So there's 90 students in my high school. I'm from a town of 450 people, and I'm really interested and anxious to get to talk with you all tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's go to Pam.
Good evening. My name is Pam Riley. I'm the 2014 Illinois Teacher of the Year. I taught kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade for 14 years. I worked for the state of Illinois for 2 years on the topic of teacher leadership. And for 4 years now, I have been an instructional coach for 2nd through 6th grade English language arts. And I also am surrounded by farm fields where I live.
Okay. See a theme. Anna.
Hi, it's so nice to be here with you all. My name is Anna Baldwin. I was the 2014 Montana Teacher of the Year, and I have spent 22 years teaching English, history, and Native American studies in a very small school, not quite as small as Luanne's, but pretty close, about 105 kids in the high school on the Flathead Reservation in Western Montana. I also, the last 2 years, I've served as the grant writer and federal programs manager for my full district. And what that has done is really given me a better view and a perspective on the issues that our students face, not only being on the reservation. We really have a lot more in common with rural schools across the state and the nation. Really understanding what some of the kids go through to get to school and to get what they need to succeed in school. So it's been an interesting journey, and I actually grew up in Virginia, so I feel you with that kind of smaller feel, but it's still not as small as where I am now.
Thank you. Is it Leticia? Did I get it correct?
Yeah, Leticia Guevara, and I was 2016 Colorado Teacher of the Year, and I've taught kindergarten through 4th grade English as a second language, and then high school 9 through 12 English as a second language, and also in college as an adjunct professor at our community college for educators. And currently I'm on a leave of absence finishing my doctorate, hopefully graduating in May. And very excited and honored to be here with all of you. And our little town is in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, and it's called Basalt, Colorado.
Thank you. Leah.
Hi, my name is Leah Luke, and I am the 2010 Wisconsin Teacher of the Year. And this is my 29th year of teaching. I teach high school Spanish currently, but I've taught everything from summer school enrichment for elementary students, ELA middle school and reading middle school, and adult education at our local community college. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, Shelby.
Hi, my name is Shelby Aaberg. I'm the 2015 Nebraska Teacher of the Year. Just got back from track practice. We're very interested to see if this historic snowstorm is going to hit us. We've been spoiled with 70-degree weather. Kind of waiting to see what happens. For my first 2 years of teaching, I taught at a larger school in Omaha. And after those 2 years, my wife finished med school and moved back home. And so now I teach in Western Nebraska, where we're 400 miles from our state capital. We're a lot closer to Wyoming than we are Colorado, or to the state capital. I'm on a different time zone than a lot of people, and I teach at a very unique high school. Our enrollment's about 1,000. We transitioned to Career Academy programming about 3 years ago. We built a brand new building with a bond issue, doing a lot of project-based learning and those sorts of things. We find ourselves majority Hispanic for the first time in our history. Our free and reduced lunch rate is approaching 80%. So the pandemic has hit us very hard. However, we've been full go face-to-face schooling since August with no interruptions. I'm the high school math chair here, and I teach a lot of upper level courses, but I kind of do it all. So I'm interested to learn what other challenges people are facing here and kind of get some ideas on how best to proceed with what we're doing with what we already have in our new programming. So thanks for letting me be here.
Thanks, Shelby. So as you see, and for those of you who are going to listen to this, we've got nice representation, Big Sky country. We've got the Midwest, East Coast, South, and West, as far as Colorado. When we think about rural education, let me give you an example of how it became an aha conversation for me 10 years ago. We in Virginia would say we are the 6th smartest state in the country based upon people age 25 and older, or ages 25 and older, who at least had a bachelor's degree, and we would all cheer. And then I took a map and said, well, where are the majority of those people? 75% of them lived in Northern Virginia. And then the rural lawmakers said, well, have you seen the horseshoe? And they actually showed me a horseshoe shape in the state of Virginia a little more than 1.2 million people. If you remove the horseshoe from Virginia and it became its own state, it's got more in line in terms of socioeconomic dynamics with South Carolina, Mississippi, and Louisiana than Northern Virginia. And it was the rural lawmakers who said, listen, we don't often see a lot of state lawmakers come to our parts of the state. We're not a very big voting bloc. We're a long way away from the Capitol. And if people come, it's only to get our vote, but nothing else. And so I began to spend time and talk, and there were issues of obesity, all the way to issues of substance abuse, but also loss of jobs. And I just saw these dynamics. So I'm sure some of you have some of those similar dynamics. And it was because of that, in part, that you decided you wanted to work in a rural community with students and families. So this is just the first question, and anyone can take a first go, is what attracted you first and foremost to the teaching profession, and why did you decide to work with urban students and families?
I could go.
From New Jersey, I see his hand up first, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think at first, I mean, the beginning of our career, I don't think many teachers really had a choice. You took that first job no matter where you went to. So I don't know if it was more of a choice as an opportunity, but I started teaching in Lindenwold, which is southern New Jersey, the suburb of Philadelphia, and Camden. A lot of it would be the second stop upward the social mobility ladder from Camden onto something better. And then I moved over to Gloucester Township. And I think what really attracted to me to these rural towns was that it reflected the town that I grew up in, which is Vineland, 56,000 people, small town with big city problems, small town with big city diversity. And I think, these students mirrored the students that I grew up with. They mirrored my family, they mirrored my friends and their parents. And it was something that I was comfortable with, but also something that that I knew I would fit in well because of my school experience.
Thank you. Who else wants to jump in?
I could just say, I'll echo what Angel said about not really choosing necessarily where I ended up, but the first and only job offer that I received for teaching was on in a tribal alternative school on the same reservation where I still am, but as a different school. And that's the school where I would tell people I was going there, and they'd say, "Oh, really? That's where you're gonna go?" And it turned out that I loved it. I had a lot to learn, as a East Coast person, as a white person teaching in an Indian school. I had a lot to learn, but what I found out was that I loved it. I loved getting to know the community, the families, the kids. And even when I moved into the school where I am now, it was no different. So I'd like to echo that, calling it an opportunity. I'm so glad that I had it and that I took it.
And I'll have to say that when I remember starting teaching, I just took it because I needed a job and I needed money, and I was a single mom and I had 3 kids I was trying to raise. So I took this job. But I remember as I grew as a teacher and I started, getting relationships with my students and the community is what makes this, and I know all of you guys will agree with me, is the community of the small town and everybody knowing each other and everyone jumping in when there's a need. I know that a lot of my kids move here from other countries and they don't have the clothes for the winter, and I'll just make it known to the community and I'll have so many bags of clothes. And it's just amazing. And that's what I love about teaching in a rural area, is that people are there for each other. Last year, 3 houses burned down and people raised money within a week to help these families. And it's just amazing how everyone jumps in for each other in small communities.
For me, it was more of a coming home type thing. The school that I previously taught at, it's like they were blessed with a lot of technology, a lot of resources. And this school, I'm a paraplegic, if you guys didn't know. So in this school that I teach at now, they was like our rival. I played football against them. And I graduated right next door. So it was like I could relate to these kids and I could understand, how they the lifestyle they're living and how they're growing up. So I felt like I could take some of the ideals and, the experience that I gained at the previous school and introduce these kids to those things. So that's the thing I was looking for too. That's the thing that drew me to going back to a smaller school.
I know you had asked the question of why we were drawn to teaching as well. So, and I think it ties into why I decided to work in a rural school is that when I was growing up, I had a very challenging childhood, very unstable, and school always provided me with that stability and security that I was lacking at home. And school was my safe place. There was structure, there were meals. I had many mentors through the years at my small rural school growing up who looked out for me. And one of those mentors really guided me into my teaching career. And I went back then to that same community to begin my teaching career. And some of those teachers were still there that rallied for me and supported me throughout those years. And I've always, wanted to give back. And part of that coming back to a rural community was the proximity in terms of why I chose it. It's where I've lived most of my life. It's my community. And I wanted to give back in the same way that my mentors gave to me.
I had a very similar experience to Pam and to Ricky too. I had the opposite problem when it came to job offers. It's incredibly difficult to attract STEM teachers, particularly higher level math teachers, to rural areas. And so when I interviewed, I probably had 15 different job offers to choose from. And I ended up landing at the arch rival high school to where I grew up. So you think about like all the things that go along with high school athletics and sports, and caught a lot of flack from my friends, my family when it came to the school where I took a job. I also grew up in poverty. A lot of the kids in our community share that similar experience. So really the calling to come back here was to serve people like me and help people like me. Went out and got my endorsement in English as a second language, taught ESL for a while here. And so that just the community resonates with me. And part of the reason why we landed here was because we needed childcare. My wife and I were starting a family. We needed to have grandma and grandpa down the road. The other thing that really drew me to this school was at that time, the ability to choose what you were going to teach. They were having trouble finding a person to put in AP calculus. And so I was that person for them. So I really have thrived on the ability to have autonomy in curriculum decisions, to be able to set programming in ways that make sense for kids and maybe look a lot different than what we might be required to do in a larger setting where there's more schools collaborating and involved.
And so it's interesting.
Well, I don't have anything. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Leah. I didn't see your mic go off.
I don't have anything fresh to say. It's like all of your stories blended together, I think. It's true. And I hadn't thought about it before Angel started, it kicked us off, and Anna and then Leticia, that, this is where the job offer was, the small district that I started out in and worked for 7 years. But when I had that first interview, during May of my final year of college, and I drove into the Cooley region, and Jared, I'm from Wisconsin, and I know if you're in Milwaukee, yeah, the rest of it's out state, right? So, but the Cooley region over by the Mississippi River, and it was gorgeous. It was beautiful. I was from Oshkosh originally. It's the flatlands. We have a big lake in Oshkosh. It's a city of about, at that time, 45,000. And I drove to a district that had, K-12, 20 kids in a graduating class, but I was drawn to the region and the scenery and how beautiful, and it just seemed like a fresh start. Like Pam, I hadn't thought about this until I was an adult, but I think that my own childhood was pretty chaotic, and becoming a teacher offered some stability and some security and a good job, to be honest. And I loved the content. I planned to teach English, but I just continued with my studies in Spanish and ended up being certified in both and teaching both. And so I think that that autonomy piece that Shelby just mentioned is a big part of it as well, because in a rural district, you have the ability to impact entire bodies, the entire school system, where in a larger district, you don't have the ability to influence, generations of kids. But that autonomy and that freedom and the creativity and the innovation that goes on in a rural district, I think is a draw to keeping you in a rural district. Because I think there's something there with that too, is that I started in a rural district, but I have chosen to stay in rural districts throughout.
So there's definitely a personal story and a personal link. And Luanne, go right ahead.
Yeah, I would just have to, again, echo so much that I've heard from so many of you. I too am a product of the community I live in. So I teach in the community I came from. And I think one of the things that drew me to teaching, because my major when I entered college was chemical engineering, was the fact that I could make a difference. And so I too on an Indian reservation, grew up with the Native American peoples. I love them. They saw me although I'm white, they saw me as one of their own. And so to be able to come back and to enter into their lives and, go to weddings and funerals and baptisms and teach their students and teach their kids and teach, generations of them has just really made a difference. And we're needed. We're needed. These rural areas need people who believe in each one of those students because there's a big world out there that they're unsure about. So I think those of us who have got that connection to the rural areas, we're really needed to be examples and mentors for the younger people as well.
Two things that I walk away so far that I've heard come up is one is impact, and number two is personal passion / personal story as it relates to the communities where you work. This question actually just is coming to mind to me right now as we're hearing you speak. Whether you were in, so I know for Luanne, you just mentioned you were electrical engineering, you have different majors. Did your undergraduate or your ed school or your alternative certification program, whichever program you went through, did it prepare you in fact to work with the communities you serve? And I ask that in part because when Angel started off with, it wasn't a choice, it was an opportunity or an option. And I heard others. How was the pathway to get you to where you are professionally?
So I would go ahead if you would like, if you would allow me.
Sure.
When I attended a private school that really reached out to a community college that served Native Americans, and their major programs that they were producing a lot of students from were nursing. And so a lot of nursing students were not ready for the levels of math and science that are required in college. And so I was asked to tutor those students, especially because I was from an Indian reservation and they were Native students. And so although I was majoring in chemical engineering at the time, I was still taking a lot of those higher level math and science courses. And so there was a recognition of a gift in me that I was able to work with these young women, mostly that were going back to college to get nursing degrees so that they could go back and help their families, but they were getting stuck in the math and the science. And so it was a whole team of professors that approached me and really convinced me to take an introduction to education course. And from there, I found that it really was my passion.
Thank you for sharing that. Others?
I had a similar tutoring experience at the university level. So as I too started out as a chemical engineering major and switched to mathematics education. Ended up being a primary tutor for the University of Nebraska Lincoln. Tutored a lot of offensive and defensive linemen in Calculus 3 and differential equations. Tutored the wrestling team in the height of wrestling season in college algebra. It's interesting when they're cutting weight and doing that sort of stuff. But that experience, getting that one-on-one time and also small group time really was a great primer in advance of student teaching and those apprentice-based experiences that a lot of us share when we enter the profession.
I have to say, maybe not the curriculum, right? Maybe the curriculum. I think the curriculum really focused on pedagogy and the actual art of teaching, classroom management, and subject matter. But I thought that my teacher prep experience did allow me in the area of our observational hours, of our where I did my practicum and my student teaching. I was allowed to have the choice of where I wanted to go, and them allowing me to have that choice of where I wanted to go. I was exposed to rural schools and the schools that I actually grew up in. So, having that choice or being exposed to different districts, I think is probably essential for our, pre-service teachers, just to see where they think they would fit in properly.
I think for me, I didn't start out in education. My undergrad is in business and with the minor in information systems. And I was a recruiter. I recruited, network engineers and programmers and things like that. And a lot of my kids weren't familiar with those types of things. So I felt, I guess I just wanted to introduce them to some things that they may not been familiar with or even thought about. And, they may want to, I tried to push them in, if they want to go to pursue a degree or some sort of a technical career or even the military for that matter. But, I just wanted to try to bring something different to them that I felt like they may not have been, exposed to or had the opportunity to have a conversation with someone about.
Thank you.
I'll say that I do not think that my undergrad or that my teacher prep program prepared me to work with rural students at all. And Montana has a law now called Indian Education for All, and it was the first state in the nation to have such a law for all students and teachers across all grade levels from primary to college, that we would learn about Montana's first people and be able to teach about them as well in our classrooms. But that law wasn't enacted until after I graduated. And so I didn't have any kind of background at all to work with tribal members or in rural areas at all. I think it was just sort of that general, curriculum that you would get in any kind of a college setting. So I think there's a lot of room to grow for teacher prep programs to prepare their students to work in all these areas, because as someone was mentioning earlier, it's really important to be able to draw teachers to rural areas. It's very hard to do that as well. And I think if they were more comfortable, it might be less daunting to them.
I would say I wasn't prepared at all either. I did my student teaching in the high school that I graduated from. So there were 450 per graduating class. And then when I interviewed at my first district, and like I said before, like 20 kids in a graduating class, that was such a stark contrast, but it felt like an adventure to me. I teach an Intro to Ed course for high school students, and it's a dual credit course as an adjunct for the university that I graduated from. And one of the things that I try to do with my students and my Educators Rising students club that supports future teachers is I try to get them, when in non-COVID year, into settings that are not like the one that we're in right now. So in the district that I teach in, it's about 100 kids per graduating class. I try to get them to a smaller rural district, a suburban district, and an urban district as our field trips during the school year, just so that they can see what education looks like outside of their own personal experiences. So for me, it was completely different than what I grew up with and what I was prepared to do.
It was a general education. I don't think much focused on the differences between rural and urban, except for we know that we have exemplar teachers, and I had an exemplar professor when I went to college that really took us, just as you said, took us on field trips. So we took field trips to affluent schools. We took field trips to our rural schools that we didn't have playgrounds, that didn't have the correct textbooks at the time. I mean, this was 25, 30 years ago now for me. And just seeing those inequities in our schools, in our state. He did have us read the book, an Inequities of Education. And so that professor, I think, enlightened us into seeing the differences. Here in Illinois, we always say that those districts north of 88, that's a highway that we have. Those are affluent districts. Those are the ones who are high paying, for our teachers, and where we lose most of our teachers too are those schools because of the pay gap there. But so as far as college goes, I would agree with Angel. It was mostly general, except for those exemplar professors that, went above and beyond.
And I have to agree with Pam too. I went to a college in a little town actually, so it was rural too. And but what I remember, and it was such a long time ago, was the relationships. They taught how relationships were so important. And I think that's so key. And it wasn't exactly like the teacher classes, but it was just other classes, and to really listen to each other. And I think that's what's really helped me. I didn't become a teacher till I turned 40. And I remember one student that reminded me about how important relationships were. And he had actually been in my class, and he would fall asleep a lot, and he would not do his homework. And I remember a benefit of being in a rural community, going to his house and finding his house and talking to his mom. And I was so frustrated with him. But before I could say anything, she just told me how he loved my class and he loved learning English. And I was like, well, where is he right now? Thinking he was just playing around. And she's like, you don't know? And I said, what? And she said, he's out scrubbing carpets at one of the local hotels because it's only me and him. And he has to make the money to help out and send back to family in another country. And he's just so grateful and thankful that you inspire him and you believe in him. And that just really reminded me about some of my college professors that talked about how relationships are so important. And he ended up graduating a couple years later, but I just think that was the key. And I'm so thankful to the professors that taught me is relationships are the most important. And that student inspires me still today. I think about his story, and I want to be that kind of teacher that inspires other students and know that I believe in them.
Great stories. When we hear, so in my case, when I tell people that I grew up in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles, all kind of things pop in mind, and they're usually negative. Boys in the Hood was filmed there, all the other points. There's a similar reaction when we talk about rural education. But just like with the Crenshaw district, there are a lot of successes that people often overlook. What are some of the successes that you've seen working with rural students and families, and maybe some things that urban or suburban schools can learn from what you're doing and what you're learning there?
I'll start with our transformation of programming. Coming to visit my classroom during finals week is a bad idea because right across the hall is a school of hair design, and it's perm week, right? So the hallway smells like burnt perms, but a kid can go over there, get their full accreditation, get their licensure for being a hairdresser in our high school. Just down the hall, kid can get their certified nursing assistant and be done with that before they graduate. We have a program where several kids have done this, where they're graduating concurrently with an associate's degree from our local community college down the street. We have more metal shop and wood shop space, square footage per kid than anywhere in the state of Nebraska. So one thing that we've done in our community is we've, through a combination of teachers, administrators, district leaders, partnering with businesses locally, in order to take what we were given with a bond issue, reconfigure our entire school and our programming to really honor the kids that are, due to poverty and other factors, are really going to be here. These kids that drop out, they become our local labor pool. And so we want to make sure they have the training necessary to thrive. We just this year coined a new partnership with Aulick Industries here locally. They make grain trailers. And so we have a diesel tech program that kids can graduate their full diesel mechanic licensure when they graduate high school. So we have a variety of programs here that may or may not be possible in a larger setting due to some of the challenges you face in a larger district with structures from the district office or the number of schools you're dealing with. But ultimately, we've done a lot of great things in serving the kids that not just are college bound. We send kids to MIT and Caltech and all those places each year, but we also have kids that will stay here locally and contribute to the local job market and be able to give back and serve, and then be models for kids 15, 20 years from now when they're coming through the same programs.
Yeah, I want to echo that sentiment. Down in South Jersey, we have a strong agriculture base, and a lot of the population that comes to work these farms are immigrant population. So you do see a cultural boom down in South Jersey when it comes to Southern America, Central America populations of people. And in response, especially when you talk about the federal government and the Dreamer Act, community colleges have been running to the helm and really affording assistance to these families who are sending their kids to college, their first kid to college for the very first time, with partnerships of higher institutions of learning. And then you see vocational schools popping up in every different county in South Jersey. And it's something very, very nice to see coming from a Latino background. I'm Puerto Rican, and back in the 70s, it was the Puerto Rican population that was working these farms. To see that we're actually finally getting to a point where we are, highlighting and providing assistance for those who are working the town, who are making the money through agriculture. And I got to also echo that sentiment that the community involvement, because you're dealing with smaller companies and smaller businesses, and it's easier for them to be involved. It's easier for them to be donating. Their kids are going to the public schools that are servicing those communities. So I definitely have to echo those two sentiments.
And I jump in too, just like Angel and Shelby were talking about community, and I started off with that. I love being a rural teacher because I love that you get to know everybody. And for example, we have a lot of immigrants too. And I grew up on the border too. So I'm Latina and I have such a heart for them. And so I remember 5 years ago, we decided to have a Thanksgiving dinner because I realized none of my immigrants students celebrated Thanksgiving because they weren't from here. and so we decided, talked to a few of the community members, and they were like, let's throw a big Thanksgiving dinner for them and say how thankful we are for them. And so people in the community heard about it and they started jumping in, and we had the chef from the local country club volunteer to cook 20 turkeys, and we had the local florist donate flowers, and the police said, we want to come and be waiters. So they're not, they know that we're here to help them. And, all the clubs at school, the students were all excited about it too. And they dressed up in black and they were waiters and waitresses. And it was just so exciting. The architects came and started measuring to make sure we had enough room. And it was very cool to have the whole community jump in. And it actually started really small, like about 40 people, but it grew to over 400 in like 5 years. And of course we couldn't do it this year, but it's just beautiful. It's to see people coming together and crossing bridges of culture and being one family. And I can't even imagine being a teacher in a city because I don't know if that could happen, but in my little town, it happens. And I love being a rural teacher.
I'm gonna jump on that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the sense of community. I mean, I think people really have covered that. I'll just say that right now in Montana, it's basketball tournament season, and all of my Facebook memories are pointing to all of the tournaments that we've gone to. We had a really good run of about 4 years where our teams went to state every year. And when you take kids to state from your tiny little school, there is a parade with horses and law enforcement and every parent car, and everybody's decorated, and it takes like forever to get out of the town. And then everybody in the town goes to the game wherever it is in Montana. And then when you come back, there's a whole parade to come back into town. I mean, it is really touching. It's really something that I think that they can have parades in big places. They just don't feel the same. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because I think one of the benefits of a rural education is not just for the teachers, of course, we love it, but for the kids to have that sense of belonging. In Montana, we have one of the highest suicide rates in the whole nation, and especially on Indian reservations. And there are a lot of reasons why. But I think that when we when we really emphasize that sense of belonging and we sort of capitalize on it in every way that we can, we help kids to feel like they're part of something bigger, like they're part of something important. And hopefully that will help them find equilibrium and stronger mental health.
I would just reiterate what you're saying, Anna. I think that's really important, especially the fact that we're building families, right? So this idea about engaging parents and families in students' lives every day. So whether it's having, you know, basketball tournaments or a STEM night or a science fair or a music concert, people just turn out, they come, right? Parent-teacher conferences where 80 to 90% of our parents show up. This is one of the greatest benefits of rural education and rural schools is we know each other and we care about each other and we make it matter.
For me, it's like my kids are involved in every sport and event the school has to offer, and they expect you to be at every event. And that's that community, you know, thing that they love. I mean, whether they see me in the grocery store, or it's like, oh my God, you know, that's just the way they are. So, but I'm excited about the fact that they are starting to embrace and show interest in, you know, pursuing fields and technology and all those things. It's not to say that they still don't. Some of them are still not interested in, you know, agriculture and ranching, and because that's here. I mean, their grandparents are cattle raisers and they love it, and I have no problem with that because heck, I did it as well. But it's just exciting to see them, you know, talk about nursing and going into various other career fields. So it's just exciting to be a part of trying to, you know, encourage and push them in those directions, and, you know, try to help them find avenues to, you know, fulfill their dreams. So.
Thank you.
I'd say I'd echo a lot of what's been said, and you know we continue to see the same families coming through our schools, and you know the older brother, the younger siblings, and we have parades for, you know, when our team goes to state, just like Anna said, and it's very heartwarming, and the family reading nights, math reading nights. And I think another piece is that our rural communities, even though there are rivals, we come together as well. So for family reading night this year, we did a family reading week with 3 rural towns working together. We live on a highway called Route 34. So we just said reading more on 34, let's bring these 3 towns together and let's collaborate. And now we have over 2,000 students collaborating across 3 rural towns. Another really small town near us only had 9 in their graduating class. So they have a lot of challenges. And one of their challenges was that some of their students wanted to play sports but weren't able to. They don't have a team. So I have this student, they were reaching out to us, that wants to play football, but we don't have a football team. So it's really collaborating with other towns too to provide some opportunities for our students, because that's what matters most.
Mm-hmm. One of the dynamics about any state is where people choose to live, where they choose to exit, and where they choose to stay. And we know that in the states that you're in, maybe the capital city might be one of the largest cities for a host of reasons, maybe not. One thing about, I guess, the challenge of some of the rural communities, not all, is trying to keep people there who want to be there. And the attraction and allure of the city, whether it's for jobs, whether it's for more social life. How do you address that? My father, for example, would tell my mother, you know, I grew up in the city. And people would say, well, where'd your father grow up? I said, Charleston, West Virginia. Now, that city is very different than Los Angeles, where I was raised. But in his mind, he says, I wanted to come to California for thus and so. And there was just an exodus of people who left his town. A lot of people don't return home unless to take care of a loved one, and maybe that's only seasonal. What are educators doing to support county governments, businesses, and others to make home a place you want to stay, not because you have to, because you want to?
I can start on that one too. One of the things that my school district has done to keep teachers like me that have, the skill sets that they're looking to retain. When we go to math competitions in Lincoln and Omaha, I like to tell people that my math club travels 6,000 miles a season, and they kind of balk at that. Well, we have to travel to these college towns to get competition. And when we go, it's interesting, the conversation you have with coaches from the city, and you say, well, how much do they pay you as an extra duty stipend to do these additional things? And they'll say things like $500 for the entire year, $800. Well, I'm paid at the same level for math club as I am as a head boys and girls track coach in my school. We're very serious about our career and technical service organizations. So like our Ed Rising sponsor is paid at the same level as a head coach of the football team. Our HOSA sponsor is paid in the same manner. So we're doing a lot of things with extra duty and pay structures. We allow our teachers to shop around for health insurance. For example, my wife works at our local hospital. So, there's some hidden incentives there that when we're recruiting these young people here, we have no other choice. The nearest teacher prep program is 105 miles from us. And a lot of these kids that we send off to get their degree in Eastern Nebraska, they have to kind of change their lifestyle. And then when they return, they're used to the conveniences of the city. And so they're really keen on going back to those areas to teach. And so, I'm 38 years old. My math department's turned over twice in the 15 years I've been here at the high school. I've hired every teacher here twice over. And in the interview, when you extend the job offer, you see the gears turn, because the first thing they'll think is, am I going to find, for a young person, am I going to find my significant other here? Where's my family at? And so on and so forth. So we've had to do a lot of creative things, but our district has really stepped up and made it so that teaching is not only a lucrative profession, but also something where they treat us as professionals.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think the public school system has to have a pulse on the industries that are prevalent in their community, and focus on the curriculum with that in mind, and focus on opportunities, equitable opportunities with that in mind, and really open up doors for our students to understand that this is a place that they can come back to, raise a family, they can contribute again and start this process anew, that they understand that this is that we are investing in them, that this is an investment in them, and that they feel that they have a sense of pride of coming back into their community and being not just an active member, but a member who may take this community to another level, and a contributing member to society as a leader. And I think schools can offer programs to that nature, to start with character development, and to really show them that we are in need of people just like them to come back and to further the progress of this rural community or town.
We find them spouses within the community. I mean, to be honest, if they don't feel anchored in the community, and there's a coercive element here too, right? But if you're not a good fit for the rural community that you're teaching in, you're not a good fit, and you shouldn't stay just to stay. That it's got to be right. One of the things that we've been doing a lot lately, and I don't know how this is going to turn out in the long run, so maybe this isn't a success, or maybe this isn't the right time to talk about this, but we are hiring a lot of our own graduates. And that's really good, because we know that they're connected to the community, but in the same time, we are becoming less diverse, right? And our students are seeing fewer outside opinions, influences, right? So I wonder what the tipping point is there. I mean, it's good to have those teachers who are committed and grounded in the community, but at the same time, we need to bring people in who are not just like the people in the community, right? So our students see others and what others are like, and exposed to that as well.
We have a big turnover rate, I think, because we're located near a resort, and it's really expensive to live in the Rocky Mountains. There's not a lot of, like, Shelby, you were describing how you've hired a lot, and I've seen that happen a lot at our school. And I think the biggest contribution our district has made to keep teachers, and it's just really in the last 5 years, is to build housing and they put teachers are first in line for lower, employee housing, and it's really helped. And, it's based on their salary, and just to be able to afford to live here, because it's so expensive and it's hard. It's really hard. So that's been a big benefit.
I think for my position that I'm in as an instructional coach is that's a big piece of my job, is to mentor our new teachers and to support our existing teachers. So those new teachers, right away, I'm training them. I meet with them weekly. We need them to know that they feel well supported, that we have the sense of family and community within our building, and that there are lots of opportunities for them to grow. Lots of leadership opportunities. We have a distributive leadership model. But as some of you have said, we have a revolving door as well. And those who stay likely are the ones who grew up near our school, near our community. We know that that's where their family roots are, and those are what we call, maybe our lifers that are going to stay. But we do lose a lot of our teachers, even with all of that support. We lose them because of the pay gap.
Our school district has been really fortunate that way. We've been able to be pretty competitive. In fact, even though we're very small, we have the 5th highest base pay salary in the state of South Dakota. And so that attracts new teachers. But like many of you have said, especially you, Pam, 40% of our teachers that teach at our school are born and raised here. It can be a two-edged sword. I certainly hear what Leah is saying, but it's also helpful that our Native American kids get to see teachers who are Native American, and that's where they have come from, as our own homegrown and raised kids. So that's been very productive as well. And so I think probably another 20 to 30% of our teachers are close to the area, so they can drive in every day. But again, I would also reiterate what Leah said. It's a match, and you don't want to force a match on someone. You can tell if they're fit for rural life. Some people cannot handle being 2 hours from a Walmart, and that's where we are, or 2 hours from McDonald's. They're not happy with that, and then that's not probably a good fit for our students either.
I'm just going to add a couple of things that don't affect me at all, but that have been tried in Montana. So a lot of our school districts are closing. The towns are, slowly dying, and the school districts are having to co-op with other schools. So there's one program out of the Montana State University in Bozeman that's actually trying to revive rural teaching as a profession, so that maybe if they have the teachers, they won't have to close the schools. And they have, I don't know exactly what the details are, but I know they have some incentives for their brand new teachers or their pre-service teachers to go do student teaching in some of the locations, because then it's easier for them to stay. I don't know if there's a job offer promise involved in that. Another district that I read quite a bit about is hiring teachers from the Philippines, and they come for as long as the visa lasts, and then they have to rotate back out. But I mean, for that town, it's probably like on the Great Plains, near nothing. The townspeople in the schools, I would say, are getting really good taste of diversity that they would never otherwise get. Of course, there's there's some downsides as well, but I thought it was an interesting solution.
Circling back to that, I would say that 70% of our students are students of color, and 95% of our teachers are white. So that is a problem. And how do we attract that? But I'm hoping that Grow Your Own, that we will see some of our own students then going into the teaching profession and coming back, so we can see those numbers tipping.
Jared, you're on Gerard, you were on mute.
Oh, yep. Sorry about that. I was saying great things about all of you, so I now have to re-say it again. So we're toward the end, and so I'm going to just throw out one last question, and you can answer as you like. We know that money matters. That's come up a number of times in here. We know that Mr. Zuckerberg gave $100 million to Newark to do some work. I was in Atlanta when one of the big corporations gave $20 million to Atlanta Public Schools. In Virginia, we had a local donor in the southern part of the state, one of the counties that actually borders North Carolina. He invested and his wife invested $5 million, which was the largest grant for that county. $3 million for the schools, $2 million for city government. And I said, what made you decide to do this? He said, because I got tired of waiting for other people to realize how good we are. I want to invest in it now and try to do something different. So he made an investment. If you had, because we may have some philanthropists who are looking for places to invest money, what would you say to them as to why they should look at rural education, be it your county or otherwise, to make an investment? Because a lot of people, for a host of reasons right now, supporting Equity University, rural America shouldn't be overlooked. Ricky, any thoughts from you?
I think that rural America can be looked at as that untapped market, so to speak. I think in so many aspects it's been overlooked. I mean, I got some really smart kids, and these kids grew up like in very rural areas, and you wouldn't think about them being very tech savvy and things of that nature. But these kids can do the same thing that I've seen my kids do at the school that I came from. I mean, they had all kinds of technology. And I'm like, these kids can do the same thing. So I felt like that's a market that I felt like is not really being tapped to, that could be your next, great entrepreneur, So I feel like, I think it's worth the investment. Don't overlook those schools, those small rural schools, and think that, all the great ideas has to come from these, these suburban or these large urban areas.
Thank you.
I agree. I would say specifically in Southern New Jersey, when we talk about diversity, it's quickly approaching a point where you have a large pool of bilingual youngsters coming out here who can hold their own in a global market, who can come back and teach in our schools. Who could be the face of a CEO of a company and be able to communicate on all different aspects. And I think that's something that we really have to see, that our rural communities are, they're becoming more and more diverse as we go along, and that there are places that we can invest in and see where, where our future can lead us with our students.
I totally agree with the guys. I just think I would say, hey, don't forget us. We have these great assets, these kids, and I would have these investors come meet some of the kids, and hear their stories and see how amazing they are. I mean, the kid I talked about that worked a job and graduated from high school and worked till 2 a.m. How many people can do that? I would say, come meet these kids. I guarantee you they would come give money if they heard some of the stories from all of our kids everywhere in the rural communities. And we're so often overlooked because we are out here and we have so many assets, and we have to give and so many strengths that people will just listen to stories.
Thank you.
I think Ricky's totally onto it, that untapped potential. And if someone were to visit my school, this is a story I've been telling recently, is that I've noticed that when I pass out their tests, that my students say thank you when I drop their 6-page Spanish test on their desk, right? And they say thank you. And I say, no, thank you for accepting my, the test that you're going to take for the next hour. But just the manners and the appreciation for the little things and the adaptability that rural kids have. And there's been some of the most rewarding parts of my career have been taking students out of the county, out of the state, out of the country on trips to Mexico or to Puerto Rico, or to Costa Rica, taking a kid to the ocean for the first time, like eyes wide open. And just those rewards, the things that you take for granted if you're surrounded with museums or opportunities, but for a rural kid to get on a bus and take a 2.5-hour bus ride to get to the Milwaukee Museum, I mean, that's a big deal for us. That's a full day and very memorable, but just how appreciative the kids are and how adaptable.
I want to jump right on that because I think something that I'd like to say it's specific to my school, but I think it's probably specific to small schools, that the students and the teachers become so they develop a bond that you do not see. I don't think that you see that in other schools that are bigger. And I think part of it, when you work with high school students, you're used to that attitude or whatever. But when we would get students transferring from larger schools to our smaller school, they always had that attitude, that adversarial, like the teacher's the enemy kind of approach. And it took a little while, but they would sort of lose that after they saw from their peers that they didn't have to be that way. And what that allows them to do then is to go out into the workforce or go to college or whatever, but go out into the workforce eventually, with a respect for people that's not just based on, age and it's not fake. And I think that really is generated by having that small group, much closer, getting to know each other much better. And I don't think that you can achieve that in very many large schools.
Thank you.
I think I would echo what everyone has said, and that if they were to provide funding, it provides opportunities for our students that they wouldn't normally get. So if Michael Jordan was never given a basketball, we would never have known his potential. And so just that digital divide that we have seen, especially amplified during COVID, that our students didn't have access to the internet or laptops, and so now they've been given that. And what I hear from teachers is, because we have the program securely where you can see what they're doing at home on their computers, on their device in their free time, is they're reading more, they're researching, and they didn't have that opportunity before. So providing opportunities to our students. And I know that Anna's been a big part of the Teach to Lead with the United States Department of Ed, and we have these think tanks in Illinois where we bring districts from all across Illinois together to make strategic plans. And it would be great to bring rural school districts together to have that think tank, because we have unique challenges and successes that we could support each other with and network.
Thank you.
And I think our resources are the people. So much of the conversation, like what Leah's saying about traveling to places, it's significant when I take my kids on the 400-mile journey to our state university. You do the overnight thing, be in a hotel, take the visit to college campus. And while they're walking around, they just see it's a bunch of brick buildings. They have this platonic or this idealized notion of what college is in their mind. And they get on the campus, they find out just like any other place. And so to that investor, that potential investor, I would say, we talk all the time about places of significance. Oh, you're from Chicago. Oh, you're from New York. Oh, you're from San Francisco. Well, we're in a place of significance because of who we have and the teachers we have. I would be remiss to not mention that I got my first COVID vaccine the last week of December. My card says 2020, in part because out here, we view teachers as that essential and that important. And we've been face-to-face, full go with COVID the whole time. I cannot tell you what it felt like coming to school in August with 1,000 kids in the building. But ultimately, I think that all of these rural perspectives intersect with this idea of it does matter where you're from. But in order to go out and get the elite training you need, or to get that next level opportunity, you're going to places of significance because of the people that are there. So if you're going to make an investment, you can have a transformative impact on the people that are in a rural community as opposed to maybe going to an urban place.
Thank you. Well, with that, let me thank all of you for sharing your personal professional stories, for opening up the door to those who will watch and listen, what it's like to work with families and communities and students in rural communities. We got a nice swath of the country that's covered. And you've actually given me a couple of ideas to think about. So if something actually matures from some of these ideas, I think about I know where to find you and know who the person to go through to find you. Thank you so much for your commitment to education. Thank you so much for your commitment to working with communities that often are overlooked. But as you said, a lot of assets, a lot of talent, and these are places to look. So with that, again, this is Gerard Robinson. Thank you for joining us for another edition of In Character, and we look forward to more conversations. Take care, everyone.